Welcome to Safe Films. In this video, we will dive into the movie Blade Trinity. We will discuss movie storylines and its ending. We will also talk about movie cast and characters. Moreover, we will discuss movie reviews and its box office. So, here we go. Blade Trinity 2004. Blade Trinity is a 2004 superhero horror film and the last in the Blade film series. It has Wesley Snipes and Chris Christopherson reprising their roles from the previous two films with Reynolds, Jessica Biel, Parky Posey and Dominic Purecoll in supporting roles. It was directed and written by David S. Goyer and received negative reviews. Plot. Small group of vampires investigate an ancient tomb in the Syrian Desert, which they believe belongs to the first vampire Dracula, also called Drac, to keep Blade from interfering. They frame him from the murder of a human familiar. FBI agents subsequently located Blade hideout and kill his mentor and friend Abraham Whistler. Demoralized, Blade surrenders and is arrested. The vampire's family have arranged for the authorities to turn Blade over to them. He is rescued by the Hannibal King and Abigail Whistler, Abraham's daughter, who invite Blade to join their band of vampire hunters, the Nightstalkers, from them. Blade learns that Danica Talos, an old enemy of King, has rewarded Drac with the goal of using his power to cure vampires of their weaknesses. As the first of the vampires, Drac is able to survive in sunlight. Along with newly innovative ultraviolet sun-dog ammunition, the Nightstalkers have created an experimental weapon known as Desert capable of killing vampires at the genetic level. However, they need a purer blood source to make it effective, as Dark is too powerful to kill via normal means. They hope that the virus will kill him and with blood in the mix ensure the rest of the species is wiped out, but also fear that this will include Blade. Eager to test Blade, Drac isolates him from the Nightstalker. He explains his view that all humans and vampires are inferior in his eyes and that the intends to wipe them from the earth. Abigail finds evidence of the vampire plans for human subjection, a network of blood farms where brain dead humans are drained of their blood for vampire consumption. Blade detective the farm's life spotted systems and executes the familiar cop who had been rounding up humans for the vampires. Returning to the Nightstalker hideout, Abigail and the Blade find all of them dead except for King and Zio, the daughter of Semperfield. Disasters, a creator both of whom have been taken captive. A recording left by Summerford reveals that Drac's blood is all that needed to make it complete and effective. King is tortured by the vampire for information but refuses to talk even when they threaten to turn him and force him to feed from the Zeus blood. Blade and Abigail arrive and free the captives. Drac eventually bests Blade in the combat and prepares to kill him with his own sword. Abigail first the disaster and arrow, but Drac catches it before it strikes him. He drops it to the floor by the blood, not realizing the danger it poses to him. Abigail shoots Drac with another arrow, this time wounding him. Blade uses the distraction to stab Drac with the Daystar arrow, targeting a chemical reaction that completes the Daystar virus, releasing it into the air. The virus became airborne, killing Danik and the rest of the vampire. As Drac slowly submits to his wounds and the virus, he praises Blade for fighting honorable but warns him that he will eventually succumb to his need for blood, thus proving this Blade the future of the vampire race using the last of his power. Drac suffocates into the blood. The FBI recovers the body, but as they begin the autopsy, it transforms back into the deceased. Dark King narrates that Drac's final transformation was a gift so that Blood could escape, leaving Blood free to continue fighting his never-ending against the force of evil. Alternate ending. In the alternate extent edition, the body is the morgue does not transform back into the Drac blood awareness as the autopsy and begins and attack the doctor and FBI agent present. The scene ends and the menacingly approaches a cowering orderly. King narrates that the virus did not kill Blade as the human half of his heart did not stop beating. It only slowed down, causing him to enter into the comatose state until his body was ready to fight again. it another alternate ending, the Night Talker reappearing his 6 months later, having tracked a warful a cousin in Asia. Cast: Wesley Snipes as Eric Broxblade, Chris Christopherson as Abraham Whistler, Ryan Reynolds as Hannibal King, Jessica Biel as Abigail Whistler, Parker Posey as Danica Talos, Dominic Purcell as Dracula, James Rember as Ray Cumberland. Trivia: the film has two alternate endings. In the unrated version, Blade woke up in a hospital and attacked to the doctor. The stage D-Star virus did not kill him and made him slowed down as a hybrid. A film ending shows Hannibal King and the Abigail Whistler hunting werewolves after the D-Star killed all the vampires. This was found in the novelization and DVD. Blade Trinity 2004. What happened to this movie? The episode of What Happened to This Horror Movie covering Blade Trinity was written by Mike Holtz, narrated by Taylor Nichols, edited by Paul Booksport, and produced by Andrew Hatfield and John Fallon, and executive produced by Berg Garbadian. You know that scene is that where he is the bathtub trying to get Mark Wahlberg to come over because he has the Chase DVD box set and everyone is talking shares about each other during the interview. Well, that's Friday 13th documentary Crystal Lake Memories, but it is also 2 days video about Blade Trinity where we break down a long and the twisted story that involves a director hiring a biker gang to protect him from his lead act, the possible birth of Ryan Reynolds and a Deadpool, and multiple lawsuits. Thank goodness all this ended up producing a universal loved Blade sequel we can all enjoy for years to come. That was a lie, and this is just that the fog happened to Blade Trinity. After the success of the first two Blade movie, New Line Cinema had no qualms with hiring their writer David S. Goyer to both produce and write the next installment. In fact, they agreed to do before the Blade I hadn't even officially released, although a darker pitch involving Blade 3 picking up after the vampires had already taken over an enslaved human was the alleged and rejected for being too dark. Goyer had been a wild writing career in the Hollywood. Some would even say his body of work in the soul proof that both greatness and tragedy can execute in search of one man. A career that began with, of all things, Jean-Claude Van Damme's death threatened in the 1990 would go on to include classic The Dark Knight and The Dark City, but it is also guilt of writing. While Blade Trinity being too far for the birth with Blade an integral part of the creating one of the earliest rated fog, that earliest overall successful superhero film ever, made Goyer no-brainer for Blade 3. Goyer would eventually be selected as the director as well, although all the time he had only one other directing credit to his name in 2002's Zigzag starting John Leguizamo, and would you like add that Wesley Snipes? You would think Snipes would be happy with the Goyer directorial choice, but we will have so much more on that later. But I will give you a hint. Snipes was indeed not Hope. He also was not happy with the original choice for the director, Oliver Hasbagel. That did not matter because the director ultimately chose to direct another film instead. Oscar nominated 2004 German film Don't Fall about the Hitler record scratches. Imagine almost not directing on the Oscar nominated film to direct Blade Trinity, and you just know everyone told him he was the crazy at the time. Do you think he wakes up in the middle of the night and just laughs like a schoolgirl where an awesome wave of relief rushes over him? I would legend has it the director of the original Blade, Stephen Norigoten, was the considering returning for the third film in the franchise but was not fan of the script. Guillermo del Toro of the Blade 2 was the considered, but then Hannibal happened and David S. Goyer was left holding the bag of wonder that was Blade Trinity, with the Wesley Snipes being a given to return as a tutorial character, or so we thought. More on that later, as well as his sidekick and the manager Chris Christopherson as Whistler. It was time to round out the cast, starting with Ryan Reynolds as the character plucked out of the comic book and given a reimagined story. Hannibal King in the comic King had first appeared in the Tomb of the Dracula issued #25 in the 1974. He has a private detective written and drawn by the Stephen Dorff record force in the comic. Through written, he has though discussed with a vampire that vowed to never consume live human blood and lived off blood, lungs, and the animal, which end up saving his life when Doctor Strange and the Blood Dream up to end all the vampire on the earth after Strange read a passage and from an occult book called Darkhold. Doctor Strange that gave the king a blood transfusion, effectively making him a new vampire and who does not it new blood to survive, but the merrily carve it. Then look, a lot happens in the comic book, but there is King is just a wisecracking white bearded with the still Reynolds right around the time of the amityville horror mix of handsome and jacked, and what we're talking about the game just get lost in half. Speaking of which seem to have a lot of the mascara on them in his movie. A lot of choices were made on the set of the play Trinity. Reynolds was set as strange place in a career that had not yet seen the like of Deadpool of his performance in the film Biel that had garnered him so much respect for his dramatic acting abilities. He was more known of the hilarious roles the played in the raunchy comedies Van Wilder and the Buying the Cow. So I will say he was underrated in the Kick-Ass and mostly unknown Finders Fee alongside Matthew Lillard, just throwing out movie recommendation here. Blade Trinity would be one of the renewed first forays into a serious badass type of the character, and it has the times awkward but the still yet there was plenty of wise as comedy in his role as Hannibal King, so much that it set up producer told the Reynolds at the time. Trust me, if they ever make a movie about the Deadpool, you are the only guy you can play Deadpool, and even sending him the copy Deadpool has to, which heroically references Ryan Reynolds that made Reynolds fall in love with the character. So basically that we are saying that if you do not have but rock Ryan Reynolds as a Hannibal King delivering what were to be fair all time and lines like Cock, juggling, Thunder Sea Note or the horse comparing a butch you don't get Deadpool. Here King may have a magic tongue, definitely other ways for me to have worded that, but he did not possess the vampire abilities he did in the comic. Though he was a vampire previously after being turned by a Danica Talos before being caught by the same outdoored as a Blade and the ultimate joining a group called the Nightstalkers, which Blade thought was still as she is not or was that Wesley Snipes. Who knows more on that later. Another member of the Nightstalker and star of Blood Trinity is Jessica Biel as Whistler's daughter, Abigail Whistler, who really fucking loved to listen to music where she farts vampire. Don't worry. So it was not the shameless apply product placement at all. As a matter of the fact, Apple did not even launch the products of the production, instead offering a 60% discount to have their products appear in many slow motion moment of the Jessica Biel, King and acts of the fear. None of this Valley Ford, who looked believable, and the dronettes are intimidating, beating vampire as the throughout running their tour. The world tour, she went through rigorous training for the role and was quite believable amidst the slow motion shots, laser weapons, techno music. She had gotten a good at the her handling of bow and arrow that 1.1 directed shot towards a camera lens. She actually hit it, breaking $3 lakh camera. A shot included in the DVD special features still, yet all the effort did not stop the marketing team from the accidentally calling her Jessica Alba in one of the film's advertisement. To be fair, we have all done it. The aforementioned Danica Talos, who had turned king after his word, he picked up in bar and then spent 5 years playing hide and go seek as the little vampire. Cabna Boy is played by the Parker Posey, who you may notice from the Scream 3 or Joyce and the Pussycat, though no one would blame if you could not make her out amidst through the adversely overzest for the vampire teeth that attire that had her wearing. She had a blaze playing at the role, however, hurriedly saying, I came here to do something fun and stupid and big budget, and I don't normally get to that the kind of thing. Don't have the boobs for it. So I am just showing up, saying my lines, having fun with it, and Wesley is not again. So much more on that later. Alongside Posey, the cook judging Thunder cannot himself definitely wanna play by the outlaw, and Jorka Grimwood, played by the legendary WWE wrestler Tribe. He is most just runs around the making big not scam vampire faces and getting made fun of. But he did not admirable enough job that the production was impressed with him to the point that they instead more lines and added to the script for the character. The main bad guys is for, of course, the character of Drac or Dracula himself. If Dracula were the pulled straight out of a carried music video of the board ones, okay, Carrie did not deserve that neither, and actor Dominic Purcell. But here we are, the rest of the cast in the chock full of the notable forces for the John Mitchell, hanging as Dr. Edgar Vance to the James Reimer, Patton Oswalt, and the even American Pie's Natasha Lyonne and the Summerfords, the blind lady in the chair for the team of the vampire hunters known as the Nightstalkers. So, what this player of the chess board and David S. Gore created a story that honestly started out with an interesting promise in the Jason Goes to Hell sort of way. I mean, the both went to hell and after their opening scene, sure, but there are other similarities as well. After a group of vampire unearthed Dracula that decided to turn the public against Blade by goading and him into the murdering a human of the live TV. In case you did not get the idea, here is shot of the Parker poses stand on the building like the Batman filming Blade with a local TV camera the size of the road player because the Blade of Trinity. What makes it interesting in that the turns of the public against Blade and the FBI and uprooting him and killing Wesley Blade is so the detective in the moment he put his word down and allows himself to be arrested. It's pretty heartbreaking to watch the Nightstalker then the break him out in the what I can only the surprise. Surmise is possessed to a Matrix sequels shoot out scene and make it fun of them for a few minutes in a very rude function that feels personal, almost like the Wesley Snipes was just talking about his feeling before teaming up with the theme of the takedown track along the way. Blood shows of his rat skull and even stop a human Capri Sun factory because a legendary battle ensues between the Blade and the shockingly Vedas look finally formed the Dracula. Meanwhile, King and the Whistler deal with the rest of the vampire, including the actually vampire dogs. Drac is so impressed with the blade fighting ability, the predators, and the style offer a parting gift of the blood ships fitting himself into the jet plunger of the blade to allow him to time escape. In an alternate, unrated version of the film, this does not happen. Instead, when Blade is brought is for an outpace his eyes, everyone the sense ending with his standing over a sacred innocent moment. It's dark. In another alternate ending that's dark of a completely different reason, we see the night crawlers hunting down a werewolf in the cousin. In the final shot, King cocks his lonely tunes weapon and quit. Did not you know for his murder before firing as the screens turned black? Believe me when I tell you it make the joke tutorials in the Tropic Thunder look like Top Gun Maverick on the noise and the hunting. While filming these assorted box of that, the fog was some moment that were just and hunting for the cast and the crew. Goyer would describe his time directing by the second ever film as the most personally and the professionally difficulty and painful thing I have ever been through, and we wrote a Ghost Rider spread of Vengeance. Snipes' alleged was not fan of the text, the script of God direction according to the actor Patton Oswalt. He has David God agree with him. If you watch Blade Trinity, it is D minus. It just does not work, but you know that they went through to get the movie made. It is an plus. The fact that movie access put it above Citizen Kane or stands and went into the joke that Snipes would only answer to the name Blade as was method acting and would only the communicate with the directed via post it not horrendously sand blade, and the Oswald would also claim that the Snipes would sit in the trailer smoking weed all day and would only show up on set to shoot his clothes up, letting his double handle the rest. It has to be noted here that the Snipes denied this allegation in the 2018 interview with the Voice.com, where he said, "Look at the source of information. He did admit to the communication via post it not to direct it David as God, but that he did so because our whole crew was banished to another side of the island of production." This may or not have been a reaction to an alleged incident where the Snaps threatened the directed and accused him of rescues. And again, according to the Oswald in a 2012 interview with the AV Club, who said the worst day on the set wherever actor was allowed to pick their clothes, and a black actor who was forced to play a club kid decided to wear a shirt that said garbage. "I am presuming it was the 19s. I am only happy when it rains." Rock band, according to Oswald, Snip said the shirt and told God they are only one other black guy in the movie, and you made him wear a shirt that guy's garbage. You reset Mother Kirk and before attempting to strangle the tractor. Snipe would also deny that, and you step further, saying if you had tried to strangle David Gore, you probably would not taking to me now. A black guy with the mustache strange the director of movie is going to the jail. I guarantee you. Did I go to jail for the stranger? Him never happened. Oswald won on the claim that after the event, while out of the drink, Gore had to group of the biker from a bar to provide protection to him on the set of the next day. Screenwriter Charis Pore, who visited the set, also the claims and numerous crew number with the execution position on the film, told him that Snape referred to the Ryan Reynolds as that character for much of the set and the boy as the girl. You may have to notice Ryan Reynolds' character Hannibal King many ad-libs to the film, many of the which were eligible him just throwing short as the wall being Wesley Snipes, or that stand in having the camera pan back to the Snipes' lack of the response, which allegedly the crew was doing just to try and get some of kind of response out of the Snipes on the set, which you kind of the harshly see playing out in the film once you have that knowledge. So looking at one the side of the premise while in the way justifying it, Snipes was being drug, it kind of led Deadpool right, and it turned led to him showing up in the Deadpool and the Wolverine, which wait a second was the Ryan Reynolds way of saying thank you for the help in creating Deadpool, or I am just a mother trying to ice scat a Bill. For what is the worth, Reynolds said it was all overblown, but did admit to Snap's method acting throughout the shoot, something Snap has denied, but everyone on the set says happened, trailing IGN in 2004. It always the overblown. My personality is the polar opposite of Wesley. I never met Wesley, I only met Blade, and it is a method. He went on to say has the art must react for that the regardless, but also the admitting he was sure of ever broke him, saying no, I did not know if I ever got him to the law of the guy's blade, and it was a challenging process. I have never experienced anything like that. Also mentioning that the elaborate line you might want to try the blinking once in while led to Blade the starting at him like the has gone and turned into the asphalt. In the same interview, Reynolds mentioned it was assigned to the Nightstalkers fan of the depending of the success of the blood, which is well we know how that turned out. Anyways, on the all these, the Gore himself offered a diplomatic response, saying the let's just say I have the tremendous respect for the Wesley as an actor. He used to be a friend. We are not friends anymore. I am friend with the patron and worked with the patron's son, so I don't think anyone involved in that film had a good experience on that film. Certainly, I did not. For what is worth, Snaps also said to Gore, I did not fault him. I don't fault anybody. That just what I was, man. Anyhow, it all gets worse before it gets better. While Snipes admitted in the aforementioned Vice interview that they never wanted to really make Blade 3 anyone and anyway, saying that the studio tried to rescue the role when he did not want to it and ended up saying new cinema driven as goal, and the executive producer Toby Emmerich seeking more than $5 million in the damage. In the lawsuit, Snipes claimed that everything for the director to the supporting cast was forced upon him. He was still earned money for the film and that he was harassed and defaulted and because of his arrest. Going back to the short, and Snipes also claimed that the court refused to the discipline a crew member who had a regular documentary a short on the set. He claimed the defendants initially hired only the white people for the film, which led to the feeling of the isolation and exclusion for the Snipes. Especially unhappy was the Snipes with the script blending Reynolds and the Biel character who much screen time, which is believed was done to create a step off for the other rather than the focus on his character. As happens so often in this situation, the suit was settled as no detail were released. In 2006, Snipes himself was sued by the United Talent Agency for allegedly failing to the pay communication his airing, and Holly Hall did over it all. Not yet Blade Trinity forced itself upon of all the world on December 8 of 2004. While the film failed to reach the financial heights of the Blade 2, which made $150 million worldwide, it did manage to pull in $132 million on the budget of $65 million. All the dispute understandably negative reviews. We could go through all the mean things the critical had to say about the Blade Trinity, but want to let the films on directed and writer David Goyer explain when he says, "I don't think anybody involved with that film is happy with the result." Believe it or not, this story has a happy ending. As you know, Ryan Reynolds rescues and the vessel snaps back for the more. Right as a blade in the Deadpool and the Wolverine, and even post on the Instagram post after the movie release that there is no Fox Marvel universe or the MCU without the Blade first creating a market. He is Marvel daddy, please share for the Logan and like stand of nothing that and many other Blade fans would love to see the character to be given to the proper treatment in another go round. Snape also admitted in his own way why had such strong feeling during his first encounter with the Reynolds, saying, "I am not turned in the way, so I thought, well, it is a little over the top for me, but saying him to in this, the context made a lot of sense, and seeing him to do it and do it well. Ryan does something that the most people cannot do. He is unique in the way and he has found a fantastic niche for himself at drawing what does that police Ryan Reynolds all the day long. So it was enjoyable to work with him. It was enjoyable to revisit. What hilarious about the feel good ending of his story that the based on that quiet I am still not sure Ryan Reynolds even God Blade to laugh. And that, my friend, is just what the fuck happened to the Blade Trinity. But seriously, you might want to get out of here. I ate a lot of garlic and I just farted. Even Blade fans will find Trinity a bloody before. I like the first two Blade movies, although my description of Blade 2 as a really rather brilliant vamptorium of Vescera might have sounded like the fan praise. The second film was directed by the Guillermo del Toro, a gifted horror directed with a sure feel for the quasi intricate and was even better. I thought that the first now comes Blade Trinity, which is a mess. It lacks the sharp narrative line and crisp comic book clarity of the earlier film and descends to the easily into the shapeless fight scenes that are chopped into many cuts that they lack all form of rhythm. The setup is a continuation of the earlier film Vampire as a waging a war of infect humanity and the most potent fighter against them in the half-human, half-vampire Blade Wesley Snipes. He has been raised from the childhood by the Whistler Christopherson, who recognizes unique ability to move between two worlds and is a fearsome warrior, but despite some timidity and the seriously outnumbered. As Trinity opened with the Vampire Nation and its leader Danik played as a Parker Posey. Yes, Parker Posey convinced the FBI that Blade is the responsible for, if I hear the correctly, 1182 murder. They have the wagging a Gatman publicity campaign. Westler grumbles is that at that great Christopherson see it all voice. Agents surrounded Blade headquarters, which is your the basic action movie space combining the ambience of a warehouse with lots of a catwalk and the high places to fall from and stuff that blows up good. Whistler goes down fighting, although a shotgun seems retro given the sci-fi weapons elsewhere in the movie, and the blade is recruited by the Night Stalker, which with him through Whistler's daughter Abigail Jessica Bell. It would have to been too much, I suppose, to hope for the Whistler mother. The Night Stalker have information that the vampire nature is seeking the original Dracula because to spread the vampire virus they need better DNA, they need the Dracula blood. Dracula surprise DNA means they can operate by day unlike his descendant who must operate by night. The nation that DNA degrade as the somehow duplicated over the centuries falls in the face of what we know about the double helix, but who needs to science when you know that, right? The found Dracula is Iraq about the 6 months ago. We learn, and if that's not a straight line, I am not John Stewart. Dracula is some canva guy played by the Dominic Purcell is not your the usual vampire in evening dress with the overdeveloped cinema, but a creature whose DNA seems to have been infected with the virus of the Hollywood monster effect. His mouth and the lower face unfold into a series of even more the horrifying fans, and the society until looks like a mug short of the original outline. He does not suck blood, he vacuum it. Parker Posey is an actor I have always had affection for, and it mixed with the increased admiration for the way she soldiers through an impossible role, smirking like the good sport she is. Jessica Bell becomes the first heroine of a vampire movie to listen to her IPO'd, and during the slang that then execute get the soundtrack by the Ramen Djawad and the RZA into the movie. I guess, although I hope that downloaded it from the iTunes store, and it is a pirate on the top of the being a vampire. Vampire in this movie look like easy to kill as the ghouls in the Dawn of the Dead. They have a way of suddenly phasing up into the electric spark and then the calcining in the pile of ash. One of the weapons using against them by the night talkers in a light saber devils it, and I am sure I have this right half as hot as the sun. Switch on one of these babies and you had to zap, and not only the vampire but British Columbia and large part of Alberta and the Washington state. Jessica Bell is the resident babe wearing the fetishistic commets of the match blade and the trimming up by the Hannibal King. Ryan Reynolds, no relation to Hannibal Lecter, a former vampire who has come over the good side. The vampire killer and the flu night stalker engage in an increasingly marked race of the battle with the vampire, leading you to ask the simple tragic question: why, since the whole world in theirs for the taking, do the vampire have to turn into the fight and the night stalker in the first place? Why not just figure out in the sense stalker at the vacuums why the vampire should concentrate on the say the material? Play Trinity Review, and other series that started out awesome but should have quite after the first movie. Well, damn it, I was really hoping that despite all the bad buzz on this thing, I might buck the trend and actually like it. But as Alex Trebek might say, sorry, no. Blade Trinity opens with a voiceover talking about how the movie have it wrong about the vampire. Right off the bat, we are treated to the joys of four-letter words in this little introduction. It is a sign of things to come. We open in the Iraq mid-tray with some special forces looking type dropping from a helicopter close to some ancient movement. In another highbrow movement, one of the members of his party covered had to toy in the protective gap, flip, and bad at the sun. This is the subtle hint that these guys are vampires. They make their way into the table find some ancient writing which one of the member of his archaeological team referred to as chicken scratches, along with the sign of a body in the ground beneath them. Beyond that, cut to some good old-fashioned blade action in which our hero is taking out vampire left and right with the explosion, sword and guns. Was welcome relief from what come before. Unfortunately, Blaze is caught on the tap executing someone. It make it into the news, and we learn that the vampire are taking a cue from the recent electronics dirty trick Play took and used the media to help take Blade off action. He gets captured by the FBI and is rescued by the couple of youngest, Jessica Biel and Reynolds, who fancy themselves vampire killer. Oh, almost forget Carrie Christopherson is killed off again. It turns out that the ballet is actually Whistler Christopherson's daughter and has been fighting vampires since she reached adulthood, which cannot have been more than 6 months ago. Of course, Blade knew nothing about this or the fact that there are cells of vampire killer all over the places. Much like the Reynolds, and one of the things that as movie as a character that should have been left out entirely. Ryan Reynolds as a Hannibal King. Take any sense where is some decent action of explanation going on and insert this guy for some surprise idiotic guesswork ridden dialogue to make you cringe and hope he stop to taking soon. I have got to tell your release this is rated R, but with the language in this thing you had think it was written by a 13-year-old who had just discovered the joys of all modern language, and considering this is rated R, why does it seem like the dialogue is aimed at a said 13-year-old boy? And other thing drove me nuts in this movie tries to be hip so often and that I swore that thought I was going to throw up. At one point, David Gore, who wrote and directed Pokken Fun and the film when Reynolds referred to their clustering group as the Nightstalker, and Blade replies that it sounded come from a Saturday morning cartoon. Unfortunately, right on the heels of the scene that rattle off another catchy name for the name of the bullets that they use. And what it up with the normal people being able to take off vampire. The main cool concept of the original Blade, which I really like BTW, is that the Snape can fight vampire because she is half vampire himself and has all their strength and the speed, and civilized to the mix, who can also whoop the vampire with marital art and fancy and ridiculous weapons, and it cheapens the Blade character. One last thing that the budget me, and it is not just in this movie, is the recent trend of the putting scene in action horror movie in which guys show the skin. I am not taking the standard shot of show muscles thing, but the kind of the shot that were once populated by women. I am this movie vampire and their family have toasted either on their whiskers or the back of their necks, which indicate ownership, but the Reynolds character has is just above the public bone of some reason, which is of course shown complete with the plants lured to the river pop-ups. Now correct him, I am wrong. But are not guys the primary target audience of this movie? Who the heck wants to see that? Perhaps David Gore is taking on too much work or is getting a little too full of himself. I found it hard to believe this is the same guy who wrote Dark City and the original Blade. If anything else, this film suddenly make me feel worried about the upcoming Batman being, which also the recently panned. Maybe in this had been Blade Dot with just snaps and a Violet might have stood a chance to being the decent, but I suppose that this does not have quite some the same it. Blade Trinity Extended Version Review, directed by David S. Gold, release date 2004, contains and spoiler. If you have already read my review of Blade and the Blade of 2, you will see that in my opinion, they did the unusual by making the sequel better than the original. Unfortunately, they did not continue the trend in this case, and the film is the weakest of the trilogy. Perhaps this has the much to do with the Del Toro passing up this film as he had the green light for the Hellboy and Gore, who wrote all three films, taking over the director reason. And I first saw these at the cinema and left bitterly disappointed. When the DVD release was available with an extended version, my hope rewritten, but the extra footage did not help. If anything, it just confused the ending, a point we'll get to later. The film starts with a voiceover by the Hannibal King, Reynolds recording Blade, Wesley Snipes, and then we see the helicopters land in the Syrian Desert. The occupants of the helicopters and wearing protective clothes, shielding them from the sun vampire. If that was not obvious enough, and one gives the finger to the sun, the entire runs lift one slave and reveals there how many archaeologists witches was that easy. In the sub basement of the ruins, for want of better description, they directed a body cue embroidered hand grabbing a vampire and devouring one of them, and then a creature emerging. Here we have our main vampire player for the film. The creator is Dominic Purcell, and I will give more background on him later. The others are Danica Talos, Parque Posse, her brother, and Shore, Colin Cat, Rennie, and Jorko Grimwood wrestler Triple H. We see on the TV interview with the foreign psychiatrists Dr. Edgar Vance, John Mazer hanging, and Chief of Police Martin Reed, Mark Barry. They are asked about the vampire and dismiss the nation. Vance says the vampire are nothing more than repositories of our most taboo thoughts. I like that. One asks about the blade that say it is trouble individual. Cut to Blade fighting vamps and a car chase. Cutting a long story short, Blade takes the last one and that does not does. It is a familiar. He is familiar with the fake fans. The whole thing is set up with the dancing family and the murder. Blade is to the public enemy number one. It all seems a little too elaborate, and we have already been told in the first film that they control the police, and this film later we discover the both vacancy and Viridi, the families. Such a movie could have been made at any time without the need for such an elaborate scheme. Cut to train situation and the group of the vampire kid. One of is wearing a lost white t-shirt and looking for a meal. They select a woman with a baby in a papoose. They go for her, but it is set up. The baby is a doll which sprays garlic, and the woman is actually Abigail Whistler, Jessica Biel Whistler, daughter for the Out of Woodlock. We see one of the new weapons in the film as UV arc, essentially a laser saw, and bit over the top even for comic book movie. The FBI raid Blader hideout, subsequently killing Wester Chris Christopherson and capturing Blade. He is dragged and about to be delivered via vans to the vampire when he is rescued by the Abigail and the Hannibal King. They take him to their hideout and explain that they are the Nightstalker, a cell of vampire slayers. What we have there are two final solutions. The vampire final solution is creating blood vamps. I wonder how long it took them to cope up with that inference. The prototype of them was a deleted scene from the first movie. The Nightstalker first solution is a virus called the Daystar, a virus that kills all vampires to be fully effectively. However, they need drag blood. Our new vampire lord comes mainly in the form of Drag. He is the first vampire and has known as the boss dragon and the Dracula. He is a daywalker, hence him being found by the vampire as they think they can have become the same, and the shapes featuring during the film that takes the form of Vance Whistler. He is also a warrior of West with the honor. So why Shopify is not that the dishonorable way to approach your enemy. In his true Dominic form has a mouth much like the repair from the second film. We also get some vampire dogs. The vampire have been experimenting with the cross species infection, including a vampire permanent, and these also have been repair mouth. The film first felt in the areas the first in the directors, like the other. This is mainly an action movie, but got released on the first cuts annoying and telling at the same time. The passing of the film same compared to the other two. This was only the second film that Goyer and the director that really shows, perhaps even more because he tried to follow one of the world's great directors. The next problem is specific scene with the Abigail. Remember a talk by her father giving his background and trying to persuade her not to be a vampire hunter. The footage is lifted straight from Blade and the visitor giving his background to Carrion Kansas with just a little voiceover added and that was just lazy. The casting and acting is also the problematic. Curtis Christopherson must be on screen on the 5-minute maximum. Wesley Snipes appear bored and the distractions having only one brilliant line with an catching a baby through by Drac and the says, Kochiku, it is difficult to take Parke Posey seriously given the trouble she seems to have the speaking with the fans in. And the Italian cat Rani has a huge amount of a screen presence and typically his character is given beggar all to do. Now, Triple H is okay the vampire heavy Jarko. There is a fight with him and the king that essentially wrestling and as king as a get submission hold him on and break his wrist. I remember thinking it would have been fun if had the tapped out. Percol is also the Okeos dragged through. I never got the feeling of ultimate evil. This is a nice scene when the goes into a Dracula merchandise store and the dislike what says, including Dracula Vampire and the Dracula Cola and the Count Choco and the career the leads to nicely done it bite sequence on the shop cult. Finally, we have Reynolds as a king despite the coming of as a bite of the Jason Lee ripe of his a great performance and the character. The unfortunate thing is that they never really gave him an efficient fall for his Homer. We get a little background on King. He has a house, chateau, and was vampire who was cured. It would have been nice to get some more background as was by far the most interesting character. Another problem I had with the film was the bad product placement. Half the time I felt like it was watching an iPod adverb. The extended version really adds very little to the film and confuse the ending. The DVD actually has 3 epic ending. The theatrical release ending make a lot of more sense given drag final word that the extended version. There is deleting ending and that the Nightstalker fighting where was in a cousin going up by the Nightstalker film on the series perhaps. To me in this weekends and link in the blade chain it is below average, cynically pushing advertising and potential for the film's race and even managed to drop an age rating 3 out of 10 reflect there is still action if poorly directed Reynolds' performance and the occasionally nice scene. 10 Wesley Snipes' Blade trilogy movie scene that still hold up today. Wesley Snipes' Blade trilogy laid the groundwork for the superhero genre, creating many perfect moments that still hold up in the modern scrutiny. The Blade trilogy states Snipes as a Marvel's eponymous hero. Though this movie predicted the MCU Unlimited, Snipes' Blade has since joined the MCU in the Deadpool and the Wolverine, considering how many superhero tropes and the techniques his movie established. This was a fighting tribute despite being over 2 decades. All scenes from the Blade trilogy continue to resonate, boasting thriller fight sequences with a unique blend of horror and the super horror. The Blade trilogy began with the 1998 release of Blade. Blade combined horror element with the marital art, creating a unique cinematic experience. The trilogy continued with the Blade second 2002, directed by Guillermo del Toro, who has brought is the distinct visual flair and the horror sensibilities to the franchise. Blade Trinity 2004 concluded the trilogy. While it was met with a mixed review, it still offered memorable moments that still stand out today. Number 10. Blade opening fight scene. One of the most iconic moments in the Blade trilogy occur at the beginning of the first movie, Blade Entrance and the Vampire Club is spectacular, setting the tone for the entire trilogy as vampire revel in a blood shower in the club. Blade systematically tears through the vampire with a combination of marital art, weaponry, and sheer physical prowess. The moment when the stake as vampire through the head pining to the killing is the particularly memorable. What makes this scene so endearing? It is perfect blend of the style and the substance. The visual are striking with the contrast of Blade all back art rays and against the web brand. chaotic backdrop of the club, the action is dynamic and the captivating, showcasing the film innovate the use of particular effect and fight choreography. More than anything, this scene established a Blade character as the ultimate vampire hunter, relentless, undealing, and the supreme confident in their ability. Number 9. Karen is attacked in the hospital. The hospital attack scene in the Blade 1998 is a perfect combination of the horror and tension that exemplifies the film's tone. In hospital, Margot carried and the seeming lifeless Kenny, one of the Recon Forest Lucky, suddenly remained and the brutal attack Karen. This provided a very effective jump scare before the terrifying Jared Coin attack Karen. And the God Scott makeup and special effect used to depict Kenneth's burn injuries are hauntingly realistic, adding a layer of vaguely horror to the scene. The hospital scene is Blade is the first ultimately frightening scene in the trilogy. Quiet burned body is the rappers still promoting a casual response even decade later. The fact that the scene built is more conditionally Blade action as the fight of Quinn and the rescue Karen. This is the essential in the establishing their relationship, but it is better remembered for the stark and the starring imaginary. Number 8. Whistler death scene. One of the most emotionally charged moments in the Blade trilogy occurred in the first film when the Abraham Whistler Blade moment and the father figure meet his tragic end, played by the character Christopher Whistler in the emotional anchor of the film, providing both wisdom and a scene of humanity to the otherwise stark Blade. Whistler death scene is a pivotal moment that adds depth and the stake to the narrative. While Blade is away, the Deacon Frost and his crew launch as a brutal assault on the Blood headquarters. Carrion and Whistler are left on the front of themselves, but they are no match. Whistler is savagely beaten with his body left under a blooded shade, making for an even more the tragic reveal. The final moment between the Blade and Whistler are filled with raw emotion delivered perfectly by Snipes and the Christopherson. Snipes in the particular conveys Blade pain and rage by the subtly showing a side of the character that is really sane. Number 7. Blade vs. Deacon Forest Vampire. The climax of the Blood 1998 is a tour of the force of action and spectacle culminating in an epic showdown between the Blade and Deacon Forest crew. This sequence is packed with the iconic moment, but not more than the Blade grand entrance after the being seemingly subdued by the Force and his followers. Blade enters as thrilling leaping into the action and the properly decaying Conan with a swift, effortless strike, sending his strangelers falling through the air. In a moment that perfectly encapsulates a Blade cool, collected persona, he catches the sunglasses and places them on this layer to an all that the brutal, demonstrating some of the best action geography as the film. The fight is blend of the marital art, swordplay, and the special effect, all set against the backgrounds of an ancient temple. The kinetic energy of the scene is palpable, with the Blade tracking down the vampire left and the right with his signature Persian style. Number 6. Blade faces the blood pact. In Blade 2, one of the most memorable scenes comes early in the film when Blade faces off against the Blade Pack and the group of the Elliot vampire warriors. This scene is a showcase of Wesley Snipes' martial arts prowess, and the film is innovation, action, geography featuring in intense and viscous combat. The sequel, the scene is notable for its flawed dynamic camera work and the palpable tension between the Blade and the vampire. The confrontation in the Blade second being with a group of vampire ninjas infiltrating blood hideout, leading to a tense standoff. Blade, ever the master of cool composer, fend of one of the injuries without even the unheating his sword, a moment of the perfectly reflect his effortless dominance in the compound. When the final does draw the sword, the fight kick into the high gear with the Blade taking on the multiple opponent with a lethal grace that is memorizing to watch. Number 5. House of Pain Nightclub. The House of Pain nightclub scene is Blade's second perfectly captured Blade unflappable coolness even when they're surrounded by the enemy. In this scene, Blade and the Blood Pack enter the House of Pain, a seedy industrial nightclub frequented by the vampire. The club is a stark contrast to the guilty vampire nightclub in the first Blade movie, reflecting the darker, greater tone of the sequel. As Blade and the Bloodbag and navigate through the thrones of the vampire, including in their voices, the tension in palpable. The atmosphere is thick with the danger as the Blood Pack member, particularly the arrogant Reinhardt, and discuss their intention toward the Blade. Reinhardt, played by the Ron Parliament, takes this moment to express his desire to kill the Blade, aiming his weapon at the Daywalker through the crowd. However, in the brilliantly executed reveal, Blade is already one step ahead, pointing his own weapon at the Reinhardt. Blade flashes a cheeky smile, a rare moment of levity that underscores his confidence and the mastery of the situation. Number 4. Blade and the Blood Pack in the Sewers. One of the most intense and the frightening scene in the Blade second takes place in the Sword, where the Blade and the Blood Pack face off against the Report. This scene is the flawless blend of horror and action. Its moment that highlight the film's darker tone on the Guillermo del Toro's talent of the creating atmospherical tension as Blade and the Blood Pack descend in the Sword to hunt the Reapers. The film shifts into the full horror mode. The claustrophical setting with the dark, narrow tunnels and the ominous sound created an oppressive atmosphere, keeping the audience on edge. The action is the relentless and the brutal. The Reaper attack with the forestry that leaves the Blackbird and the struggle to survive and the close quarter combat add to the intensity. The Reaper design with the gaping jaw like the mouth and the paw almost translucent skin in the genuinely terrifying and the gratuitous. Number 3. Black Kill Spot. Throughout Blade's second Cube in the presented as a Blade loyal sidekick and responsible for creating and maintaining Blade arsenal of the vampire killing weapon. However, as the story unfolded, it revealed that the sketch has been working as a double agent for the Reapers and their leader Nomek. This bitterly comes as a surprise to both viewers and character. However, in a brilliant twist, Blade reveals he was the aware of the Scob brutal second along. Blade then activities and the exclusive device Scob in the holding, leading to the character gruesome and the explosive demise. The double reveal created a moment of the cathartic satisfaction. Scob brutal is the unexpected, but the Blade cool, calculated, responsible is a reminder why is such an effective and the dangerous protagonist. The scene also survives a reminder that is Blood's word. The battle is always a possibility and trust is a rare comedy. Number 2. Blade fight Demoxconal soldiers. In Blade's second thriller complex, Blade seemingly defeated and make the triumphant comeback against the Damascene soldiers in the brutal and the dynamic fight sequences. This scene is a consequential moment in the trilogy, highlight the Blade realizing and the compact skill and the unyielding determination between and the injured Blade falls into a pool of blood where his visual in the restore, creating some incredible powerful imagery. What followed is a thrilling battle as a Blade take and the Demoxcane soldier who is armed with the electric buttons. The fight is intense and the first phase with the Blade dispatching the enemies with the lethal efficiency. The geography is especially brutal and precise. The scene built is a climatic showdown between the Blade and the Reinhardt is a characteristically iconic moment, and the Blade stop Reinhardt and the sword with his bare hand clapping around the Blade. The fight ends with the Blade slicing and the Reinhardt in the half is a fighting satisfying end of the violin. Number 1. Blade Trinity opening fight and car chase. Blade Trinity may not be as high regarded as its predecessor, but it still has its moment of the brilliance, particularly in its opening fight and the car chase sequence. This scene is easily the best part of the movie and stands out as some of the most exciting and dynamic sequences in the entire trilogy. The sequence begins with the Blade infiltrating a vampire hideout where the Quake dispatched with the enemy with the combination of his trademark marital art movies and the new impressive weapons. The scene that the transition into a high occurs car chase as a departure from the usual setting of the previous film. Blade in his sleek black car pursues vampires through the city streets. This opening sequences set a high bar of the rest of the movie, which it unfortunately failed to meet. Nevertheless, one opening scene remains one of the most enduring and the captivating moment from the Blade trilogy. 20 years ago, Blade Trinity's rejected first pitch was what was the MCU need for the 2025's reboot. The original pitch for Blade Trinity had some idea that could be a perfect way for the MCU to reboot the franchise in 2025. An MCU Blade movie was the first announced in the 2019 starring Mahershala Ali as the titular vampire hunter. However, despite the initial excitement over the announcement, Blade has proven much more difficult to develop than it ever needed to be. The upcoming MCU movie has gone through 4 different writing teams, including Stacy Ose, co-for X-Men 97 creator Biel DeMaio, the pairing of the Dre detectives Nick Pizzolatto and Mitchell Strawberry, and the final Mitchell Green. Mitchell Green is said to be the final choice for the Blade screenwriter, with the initial director Basan Tariq being the replaced by the young Deming, as the evident Blade production has been much more trouble with the original Blade trilogy 20 years ago. This trilogy, starring Wesley Snipes as Eric Book's Blade, consists of 1998 Blade, 2002 Blade Second, and the 2004 Blade Trinity, although the later film turns 20 years old in the 2024. Blade Trinity original story idea may prove to the exactly what the MCU needs to the craft fantastic Blade reboot. David S. Goyer revealed Blade Trinity was almost very different. The original Blade trilogy was written by David S. Goyer, with the screenwriter taking up the directed duties for Blade Trinity in a set of visits recorded on the Coming Soon .net from the 2004. Some initially plans Goyer had for Blade Trinity were the outlined as revealed by the Goyer. His first idea for Blade Trinity involved setting the film in a post-apocalyptic future. The film is the first going to be based on 1 a.m. and the legend in the 1954 novel that popularized the modern depiction of the vampire and zombies in media. In Gore's original idea, Blade would be shown navigating a post-apocalyptic world after the vampire had come the more dominated race on Earth. As Eric Books and the aged Slore do his work, vampire traits that would have been living in a world in which humans lived in the compass to provide the sustenance to the vampire. The vampire would have been unheaded a virus into the air that causes sunlight to shine for the only 2 hours day, giving the dark during creating more freedom. However, God went back on his idea as a fault match of the fun as Blade movie come back from the books being set in the real world. That side, some of these ideas did make into the Blade Trinity. One set its concept in the idea that Blade Trinity violence vampire would make the blood farm where the human are kept for them to feed on. Also, the concept of the virus was rewritten into the Daystar virus from the Blood Trinity, which eventually killed all the vampire on Earth. A post-apocalyptic blood is the simple enough to work. While the several ideas of the initial Blade Trinity script may not be ideal for the MCU, the concept of the post-apocalyptic blood film is the simple enough to work for the reboot. One of the more prevalent questions surrounding the MCU's blood and its many production issues is audiences asking why it is so hard to make a movie about the how Blade Trinity made Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool better. Ryan Reynolds' performance as the Deadpool is perhaps one of the most inspired pieces of comic book casting in history, yet the actor actually had the perfect preparation for the role thanks to the much maligned Blade Trinity, the 2004 sequel, also starring Wesley Snipes and Jessica Biel, was critically panned on its release and has been unfavorable compared to the trilogy earlier installments. Nevertheless, thanks to the part of the fast-talking sidekick Hannibal King, Blade Trinity inadvertently became the perfect crash course for crafting what has become one of the most beloved cinematic superheroes of all time. Although Hannibal King and Dracula have enjoyed widely different receptions from the movie-going public, there are several undeniable similarities between the pair. Both showcase the same Arabic with the often release up appointed and while also demonstrating a fear of the obscene language. Likewise, both the character and unfair to use the extreme violence to further their own ends and seemingly revel in cultivating the tension with a joke just before inflicting brutal punishment on its enemy. Yet, despite the similarities, there is no doubt that the Dreadful present and the more refined version of the archetype also displayed by the king. As such, being able to track the evolution of Ryan Reynolds' characters from the obnoxious blade associate to full-formed leading mutant actually makes this interpretation of the Deadpool even better. How Ryan Reynolds' Blade character is like Deadpool. Beyond their sense of humor and communication style, there are also a number of thematic links between Hannibal King and Deadpool, as the Reynolds himself explained in the Deadpool DVD commentary. Everything from the gross-out humor to Hello Kitty references are also slight nods to Wade Wilson. Further similarities can be found in the scenes such as King captured by the vampires, which not only involves the character mouthing off in the typical Wilson fashion, but also bears a striking resemblance to the Deadpool's torture by the Frenchers in the 2016 Marvel movie. This connection making less of a clumsy partish and more of the deliberate homage to the iconic mark with a mouth, albeit by the without the Deadpool, Jossens and the genuine sense of fun. That said, there are some clear differences between the two characters. Most obviously, Hannibal King lacks Deadpool's signature regenerative powers and is clearly a sporting figure to Wesley Snipes' vampire-stopping main hero. Yet in the same ways, this position also came to fully lean into the aspects of his personality that correctly with the wide version. For instance, in Blade Trinity as the climatic fight sequence versus Biel and the Snipes to battle with the endless wave of the undead. Reynolds' King has to go toe to toe with a vampiric Permanent and a pair of the Rottweilers, defeating them not with brute force but by making that jump out of a window. This deliberate ridiculousness not only the marks King out a clownish figure that is reminiscent of the spirit, if not the exact content of many of the Deadpools on the chartically comedic and fight as such from the tonal perspective, there is a further clear link between the Hannibal King and the White Wilson. Blade Trinity proved why Ryan Reynolds is perfect for the Deadpool. Although the movie as a whole is considered a failure, Blade Trinity served as the perfect audition for the Ryan Reynolds take on the Deadpool. It's clear that Hannibal King quippy comedy comes in the incredible naturally to the Canadian actor and making him an ideal choice for the other similar character. While Deadpool is a much more refined and the complex role thanks King to one of the demoniacal vampire boosting assistant, both parts require natural comic timing and ability to thrive on some of the more self-serious elements surrounding them. Whether it's John Brulin Cable of the Wesley Snipes Blade, both the Deadpool and King are at the fanciest with the constructed against a hautier companion. The fact that Reynolds made for the such natural comic relief in an early example of an irritated superhero movie perfectly demonstrated his candidates for the wide version. Blade Trinity might have a failure, but it did allow the Ryan Reynolds to show the exactly why he is the only choice for the Deadpool. Blade Trinity alternate ending would have fixed its biggest mistake. David has scored Blade Trinity has an alternate ending that would have fixed the movie's biggest mistake. First released on September 8, 2004, the third and the final installment in the Blade trilogy, sees Wesley Snipes' Blade attempted to end the vampire-human conflict once and for all by the defeating his eternal enemy, Dracula Dominic Percure, yet despite an epic premise and $132 million box office haul, Blade Trinity has um, unequally have been deemed the worst movie in the Blade trilogy, a concessions odd and small part of the movie's bizarre ending. Blade Trinity Coda delivers on the promise of a showdown between the Blade and Dracula, the first vampire, with the pair clashing in the formulaic fashion as the world's fate lies is the balance. Although boosted by a vicious Dracula Blade and his human Chorods Abigail Whistler and the Hannibal King, Ryan Reynolds, in his first Marvel appearance, managed to release the D-Star virus and wither the vampires around them. As Dracula dies, the suddenly changed tone, congratulating a Blade on winning and the honorable fight before the specifying in the first version of the Blade to let the FBI think Blade is dead. This random moment of kindness and humility from the Dracula further marks what is an already Bengals ending in Blade Trinity, going against every previous narrative beat Dracula character has established. Marvel Blade survived the worst studio madding of all time, yet Blade Trinity alternate ending would have fixed the movie's biggest Dracula mistake. Blade Trinity DVD exclusive unrated extended edition swaps the movie original ending for a far more chassis story that ties in Blade heritage as a vampire and his ever-growing hatred for the FBI in two quick, clean scenes. As a result, here's how Blade Trinity alternate movie ending would have fixed its biggest mistake, as well as why the ending Goyer ultimately chose for his movie is so strong. Why Blade Trinity ending is so strange. As aforementioned, Blade Trinity ends with the Blade and his allies defeating the vampires by releasing the Daystar virus, which quickly becomes airborne, while Danica Talos and the rest of the vampire perish instant. It takes the Dracula track longer to scam through the virus, allowing him for one final conversation with Blade. During the exchange, the praises Blade for the fighting honorable but warns him that the will eventually succumb into need for blood, stating that the blood always wins, the alluding to Blade as the future of the vampire race. Using the last of his power, Dracula then the shapeshifts in the Blade and allows the FBI to recover the body. But as they begin, the atrophy is the transforms back into the decayed Dracula. Hannibal King the subsequently narrates that track final transformation was a gift that Blade could escape, leaving Blade free to the continue fighting his never-ending war against the forces of evil. However, this mention of Blade's honor and the subsequent parting gift flies in the face of everything Gore's final Blade movie tells audience about the Dracula character. Throughout Blade Trinity, the revived Dracula is shown to a cruel, manipulated and the visual entity nicknamed the Beast who no problem massacring innocent at will and using rampant death as a chess piece in his pursuit of Blade. While Dracula does show a clear administration for the Blade Jaywalker status, that does not account of a clear change in the motivations and thought process on his deathbed. It makes no difference to the Dracula whether or not Blade is hunted to the captured by the FBI, making the choice to use the last of his life force to the transformed in the Blade. And that longer, all the more puzzling in this why Hannibal's final narration regarding Dracula as make no sense. With Dracula, his skin, literally the evil Blade, was a sword to the fight across the entire trilogy. Blade Trinity alternate ending explain. It contrasts Blade Trinity alternate extended edition ending appear a much neater fit to the Gore's overall story. Following his final exchange with the Dracula, the Blade Trinity alternate ending sees Blade body taken to the Morocco by the FBI for the testing, and before the Daywalker suddenly wakes up on the operating slab and begins fighting back against the Bureau medical staff. Enraged and Blade appear to the heart several ordeals before the turning his attention to a covering nurse, although her fate is left unclear, as with David Escobar final Blade Trinity, ending the scene that the chains to the blade riding a motorbike on a Hannibal narrates expect this time. Hannibal explains that the D-Star virus failed to kill the blade due to whole human temper oranges and which the protected him from the virus. Why Blade Trinity alternate ending makes for more sense. As a result, Blade Trinity alternate ending fits for the better with the themes and lore established across to original Blade trilogy. The first link here, the Blade famed vampire origins are depicted by the Blade 1998 with Blade being a half human, half vampire ammunition that they can survive in the sunlight. The Blade trilogy goes to great length to establish that Blade Daywalker's status set him apart from all that vampire, even the Dracula with Blade naturally stronger than all but the vampire progenitor in the compound. It makes sense therefore that the D-Star virus would act as another differentiation between the Blade and the vampire race, with D-Star promise to kill normal vampire as opposite to the targeting the human hollows of the vampire as well. Furthermore, Blade Trinity alternate ending also indicates that Dracula suddenly benevolence in the favor of a far darker, more apt and the conclusion. By having Blade react aggressively to the FBI medical staff, Blade Trinity alternate ending hits there may be a shred of truth of the Dracula final words about the blood always winning, setting up a bleaker timeline in the which Blade may give in the bloodlust and this Vigor's decision to omit this ending in favor of the theatrical cuts version in the Parablinkis with the Blade Trinity alternate ending perfectly tying of several of the movie laws narrating theaters and why it is through the Blade Trinity's issue run of the Jeeper then a purely convinced ending, there is little doubt that its alternate unwritten conclusion would have fixed one of the movie's most glaring problems. 10 wild behind the scenes facts you would not believe happened on the set of Blade Trinity. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is gearing up for an upcoming Blade movie and fans are now speculating if vampires are the MCU future villains. It is an exciting time to be a Marvel fan as a Robert of the Vampire Hunter is one of the movies that audiences are excited for most and it has been almost long enough that the fans have forgotten about the notorious Blade Trinity. Blade Trilogy 10 Smartest Character Ranked. Blade Trinity is the Wesley Snipes starring David Goyer directed third movie in the original Blade series and it had the infamously troubled production that had been rumors of the associate and the biker pretending to the security guard for years. But in interview with the AV Club Porton Ovalt and who played the Hodge in the movie opened up about all the shocking things that happened. The reason why Snipes called Goyer reset. Snipes infamously called Goyer a reset with shooting the vampire movie and Oswald revealed exactly why that happened. One day while on set, the director allowed all the extras to wear their clothes for a scene and a black extra wore a tee and that had the garbage scrawled across in and gained letters. Snipes was not aware that all the extras were wearing their clothes. So when she saw one black actor on set that wearing a tee that the sad garbage, he has the ostrich and the genial thought it was the director choice to have him wear it. Snipes tried to strange God. The most notorious occurrence that took place during production of the Blade Trinity was when Snipes allegedly tried to call Goyer. It has been well documented by other members of the crew and cast well as Oswald, but thought Oswald has no problem going into the finer detail of almost everything that happened during the trouble shot. He has not go any further than simply saying he tried to strange the director. Trinity movie crossovers according to the Reddit. However, Snipes vehemently denies in an interview with The Guardian with the Blade actor attempts in discredit Oswald and they argue that it would not have to taken him along to the get arrested. Snipes argue a black guy with the muscles strangling the director of a movie is going to jail, I guarantee you. Goyer hired a group of the biker to pretend to be his security. While lots of great documentaries about the film have been made in the past, they could be have made movie by the production of Blade Trinity, and it had be by far the most entertaining of the all. And the most entertaining bit of information revealed by Oswald was that he and the Gore visited two steps club. They ran into the group of the biker, and Gore had an interesting proposition for them. The director offered to buy the biker there the drink of their entire night just along that she has to next day and pretend to his security. The fake had worked as Snaps was too scared to come out of his trailer. Snaps would only do close-ups when shooting a movie of its actor at the busy rehashing lines of the working on some other part of the production. They often the stand lines are for the shots where the faces cannot be seen. There are usually over-the-shoulder shots or long shots of the character from far away, and they are generally shot by the scene untried team. However, the snaps took stand into the whole other level as did not show up for any shot that the of the close up. But even despite of the catching along with the tractor or any other reason, it seems like self sabotage as a Snipes one an executive producer of the movie. Snaps would stay in his trailer smoking wait. According to Oswald, Snaps refused to reveal in the trailer, and not only that, but it got to the point that I refused to speak with the Gore face to the face, and the actor would only to speak the director through the post. It notes that had make his assistant deliver. The start of the movie smoked the marijuana all day, which the probably was not going while going over his lines. Ironically, the making of the movie sounds like the promise of a hilarious stoner comedy, and that had been even more entertaining than a documentary. Snipes and Gore tried making each other too quiet. Between the association of the regime and the literally assault, the toxic relationship between the Snipes and Gore naturally came to a standoff, and as the Gore had written every Blade movie and knows the character better than any other screenwriter, and as Blade is Snipes' best movie, it was some standoff. Oswald explained that Snipes and Gore, you need to quiet, you are determinedly to this movie, and Gore hilarious responded, why did not you quiet? We have got all the close-ups and we could shoot the rest with your stand in. Snipes stayed in the character whole production. There have been so many infamous accounts of the Hollywood star who method act, and the Daniel Day-Lewis takes method acting to extremes, but the time when actor have been in the character in between the scenes and unusual for dramatic Oscar Calbert's role, not blood-sucking vampires. Ten actor you forgot when in the original Blade trilogy. Osler claimed that the snaps was a method acting during the production of the third Blade movie, and that the stayed in the character whole time. The hilarious even stayed in the character when they refused to leave his trolley, and the signed in his post it not from the Blade. All of Reynolds' line were improves, and because the snaps refused to ever leave his trolley and trollier even when he still had scene with the dialogue to shoot, it left the cast and crew with not much to do beside the theatricality where the thumbed with Gore but made the best out of the bad situation, and the showed more footage with the Ryan Reynolds. Audiences now what to expect when they are about to see a Reynolds starring movie as his quick where the appears in every film, and that seemingly started with Blade Trinity. Snipes adding in his trailer allowed Reynolds to show off his improved skill, and it also explained why the Deadpool actor has been more screen time than the tutorial character. Jessica Biel destroyed a camera. Not all of the drama on the set of the Nighttalkers movie surrounds the constant struggling battle between the Snaps and Gore. Jessica Biel played the Abigail Whistler in the Blade Trinity, who is an incredible sporting character and the best Marvel actor outside of the hockey. It turns out that Biel is a better archer than anybody working on the movie could have imagined. The actor was instructed to aim the route to the camera, and which the product of the plexiglass except for one opening for the lens. Bell shot the route through the opening and it hit the lens, setting production costs back $3 lakh. The CGI eyes. At the every end of the third movie, Blade's body is pulled out of the morgue. His eyelids are shut, but the CGI eyes are edited over the top of the Snap's real eyes. The bizarre choice was not choice at all. One day of the shooting, that scene Snaps refused to open his eyes. That one effect not only looked terrible, but it must have cost the production thousands of dollars more and the countless man hours with everything that happened on the set of the movie. It's hardly surprising the Snap did not this, but at the same time, it's the simplest bit of the acting he ever had to do, and the refusing to adjust goes to show the angry Snaps much have been with Gore. Blade 3's earlier I Am Legend inspired movie plan, why it was cancelled. Blade Trinity is a famously flawed sequel, but the original plan for the film would have taken costs from the apocalyptic novel I Am Legend back in 1998, why before Marvel decided to create Marvel Studios and change pop culture forever with the MCU superhero movies were far from the sure things at the box office. That's what makes it all the more impressive that Blade also solo debut was able to buck that trend ever before. Sony Spider-Man and the Fox's X-Men started to turn to tide toward comic book blockbuster. Blade starting Wesley Snipes as the tutorial Daywalker did not break the bank in the same way modern Marvel and the DC movie do, but it still did ever well, especially considering its R rating. Blade earned $131 million on the budget of the $45 million, and the Guillermo del Toro 2002 sequel Blade 2 improved on this number. Albeit not massively, many fans also saw Blade 2 being better than the original overall, so the anticipation for the Blade Trinity was through the roof. All 13 Marvel movies releasing after WandaVision. Then Blade Trinity actually came out and nearly everyone was left disappointed. The story involving Blade going 1-1 with the Argo Belly, the worst Dracula's movie history, was a huge letdown and the came short of the predecessor quality level. It turns out through the Blade Trinity fans ultimately go was not the original plan for the film. Instead, Blade 3 almost went in a much more high concept direction similar to Richard Matheson's classic book 1 I Am Legend, and Blade 3 was almost I Am Legend, but those plans were cancelled. The original concept for the Blade 3 was actually revealed prior for the film release back in 2004 via an interview director David Goyer did with Coming Soon. When asked about the Blade Trinity come to then include Dracula, Goyer let to be known that the first story idea for the Blade 3 was to jump 40 years into a future dystopia in which the vampires have become the dominated species and the surviving humans are the concentration camps. Helping this transition occur was the Empire's side putting particulates into the air that caused the sun to remain hidden for much longer per day. Thanks to being half vampire, Blade has aged much less than a human would in 40 years, and he has the basically a one-person resistance to the blood-soaking, scoring has got drawing comparison to I Am Legend with the discussing the idea in the interview. Gore says the made call to change Blade Trinity direction and after deciding to Blade the adventure belonged into the world close to the real one and not in a fantastical future setting. However, some other possible reasoning can be extrapolated when the considering the final product. Gore's original Blade 3 plan sound much darker and more dramatic than the lively action flick fans got at the release and the attempted one. Plus, there are a lot of the humor in the Blade Trinity, much of the curiosity and the future Deadpool actor Ryan Reynolds that would not fit all the in an I Am Legend types scenario. That is appear likely that New Line executive may have been looking for a sequel that tried to be more fine and less door additional that the budget required to make a future as story would almost certainly have the deferred one set in the contemporary time. Otherwise, the apocalyptic Blade Trinity could have definitely been a winner if done right. Marvel's newest hero is stealing a movie from Blade Trinity. Werewolf by Night has returned yet again to Marvel Comics with a fresh new take amid and the swirling rumors of a MCU debut in the near future. Jack the Gomez is the 17-year-old living on Hopi Reservation who also happens to be as the little suggests as a werewolf by night. This new interpretation of the werewolf myth changes every night, whether there is full moon or not, but there is more it to than that. Heightened emotional and physical state can also the trigger to the transformation such as hunger, anger, fear, danger, and the distress. There is a lot of the factor to the consider when one is trying to keep a low profile. Thankful for the resident of the reservation, Jack is not interested in staying under the radar, but it inspired by his friend and the romantic interest. Molly to use his the less philanthropic power for the good of his community. But what does any of that have to do with a box office flop from the 2004? Remember Blade Trinity, the third and the final installment of the Blade franchise, which started off an hot streak and by the end came to the gambling halt. The film was written and directed by the David S. Goyer, who wrote the whole trilogy, but it is better known for his work in the Christopher Nolan Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. The film introduced two new vampire hunters to the mix, Abigail Wister and the Hannibal King. The latter was the Ryan Reynolds' first outing in a superhero movie, a genre that the first deterred but that eventually captured his career. The former is played by the Jessica Biel and is revealed to the alleged daughter of the Blade, recently deceased mentor Vestal. Other than using a bow to hunt the vampire, turns the Abigail by the another quarter, and which is earlier similar to the hero of the Werewolf by the Night, using the music playlist in the battle. Marvel rescued horror icon Werewolf by Night just in time for the Halloween. In the word of the Jack Gozan, by the start of the Werewolf by Night has to, written by Benjamin Jackendoff Aka by the early and the Tubu, and the illustrated by Scott Eaton. I am an emo werewolf who can transform at night and uses his music to control my werewolf from the terrorizing local gun toting joke. By modeling of the pair of the wireless earbuds, they have to create a kind of the werewolf soundtrack that by affecting his mod can also affect his werewolf state, not just the helping him to control his transformation from the human to werewolf and the back again. The musician as a mentor, like the focusing quality. For example, he will play the track Redbone to get him the fired up, and the channel is killer instincts before a fight, and the chop shoy by the system of the dawn to get him back after the backing knockdown. In the film, Abigail Wister is never without his drokor and the trip hop, the pumping earbuds with the she is hunting. It's explained that she is uses as kind of the internal soundtrack, keeping her mind focused on the fight, of course, of the someone without the physical abilities and the heightened sense of the werewolf. It is a little silly that the inhabited heard the hearing while engaging multiple enemies. Sure, it is not as if she wearing the blood fault that the hearing someone coming up behind you can the nevertheless by using the while fighting vampire. Unlike Jock, however, who relies on the Molly to DJ the track while he is not the beast from the Abigail makes her own the playlist. Considering that Werewolf by the Night by co-write in the and other Tobo of the Black Eyed Pass, who is himself of the Aboriginal Mexican descent, it is more fighting that the music can play an important part in the main character life. And although the Abigail Jack use of the musical playlist and battle more than the like a complete, considered it's the still as uncanny point of the connection between two of the Marvel supernatural comic book properties. Watch Blade Trinity's Jessica Biel destroy a camera with her archery skill. Blade Trinity star Jessica Biel became a good with her bow and arrow. She accidentally destroyed an expensive camera. The original Blade starred Wesley Snipes as the tutorial hunter, a half-human, half-vampire hybrid. Due to its fantastic action and Snipes' central performance, it became a surprise success in 1998 and helped make comic book movie cool again. Guillermo del Toro directed 2002 follow-up Blade 2 and were the hunter tamed his sworn enemies to stop the rebirth and involved bloodline unkillable new strain of the vampire. Both of the original Blade movie are considered gems, but Blade Trinity went very wrong during the production. Guillermo del Toro departed to make the Dream Project, and Hollywood and the screenwriter David S. Goyer took over. His original concept was a Mad Max style adventure where vampire had taken over the world, but this was scrapped due to the budget issue. Wesley Snipes was so unhappy over the direction the movie took, they include adding new sidekicks dubbed the Nightstalker with the spin of potential that became the difficult to work with during filming. He would never talk with his co-star out of the character and would often communicate through post-it note. At one ending shot of the movie that Overblade was the supposed to awaken of a Margot Trable. He simplifies refused to open his eyes, which were later added with CG. Why was the snaps has CGIs in one Blade Trinity scene. Blade Trinity is now best remembered for its behind-the-scene problem that the actually movie did provide a good vehicle for the Ryan Reynolds, and however, who has the since admitted his Hannibal King performances was a prototype of his take. A Dreadful and other key member of the Night Talker is the Abigail Whistler, played by the Jessica Biel. Abigail is the daughter of the Blade partner Whistler carries Christopherson, who trained toward the Seeker to take over his war vampire. One of the Abigail's main weapons is her bow and the arrow, but Valley communication to training to lead to a costly accident during the filming. In Blade Trinity, climatics in Abigail has to shoot a special arrow at the main villain drag, aka Dracula, that the release a special vampire editing virus during filming. For his key moment, Jessica Biel was introduced to aim for the camera, which was covered by the plexiglass to protect the crew. There was a tiny opening for the lens, but the belly and aim was so perfect. She shot the arrow right into it, destroying a camera worth an estimated $3 million, which the Jessica Biel nailed. The physical aspects of her Blade Trinity role. The Abigail Whistler character did not give her much to the work with. The why Abigail listens to blaring music on her iPod during the fight was also the criticized scenes rendering her hearing essential. What less hard it seems like a good idea in a combat situation. The underwhelming performance of the Blade Trinity killed off the chance for a snip off, and though an alternate ending was not that the future that Nightstalker facing off with a vampire were full habit. Blade Trinity Cast and Character Guide. Here is Cast and Character Guide to Trilogy Capper Blade Trinity. While the success of 2000's X-Men is often credited with the crystallizing the modern day of Vision with the comic book movie, it was 1998 and the Blade that made the genre cool again. After the planned adaptation of the Black Panther failed to come together, Wesley Snipes signed on the play Blade instead, the half-human, half-vampire hybrid who had hunts down other blockbuster and with an arrow of the gadget and weaponry. Snaps were perfectly cast, and the film featured as a rich mythology and the whistler action sequences. Snipes reprised his role for the Blade 2 with the Guillermo del Toro, The Shape of the Water, taking over the director chair. The sequel is arguably superior to the original with a great cast and action. Sadly, Blade Trinity was a mediocre final. The original pitch involved a Mad Max-style adventure where vampires have taken over the world and the enslaved humanity, with the Blade being the only who can save the day. New Line deemed these too expensive, so writer-director David S. Goyer instead wrote a script that the basically Blade vs. Dracula. Snipes was very unhappy with his new angle, and the Goyer as director and was famously difficult to work with, and production include the refusing to shoot certain scenes and the delivered dialogue. While Wesley Snipes is not returning as Blade in the MCU, Blade Trinity was a modest success, but it easily considered that weakest of the three films. Trinity was followed by the short-lived Blade TV series and the Blade franchise, with the robotic of the MCU with the Marshala Ali taking all over the role. Let's take a look back at the Blade Trinity cast and the character. Wesley Snipes Blade. Wesley Snipes Dolomite is my name returns as a vampire hybrid who is formed by the murdering a human at the start of the Blade Trinity and must team with the Nightstalker to stop a vampire plan to take over the world. Chris Christopherson Abraham Whistler. Chris Christopherson also written a Blade crusty mentor Whistler who is feeling his age when the story began and worries about the living Blade along with the passage. Whistler is later cared with the police raid their hideout, but it is soon discovered he has another daughter named the Abigail. Jessica Biel Abigail Whistler. Jessica Biel, the snapper, is Abigail is the Blade Trinity Whistler's sacred daughter who fight the Night Stalker. Abby is somewhat emotionally closed off and dedicated to combat with the short on the badly affected by the death of her father and later on the most of her Night Stalker unit. Ryan Reynolds, Hannibal King. Ryan Reynolds admitted his the copy trick. The Hannibal King was a prototype of his eventually Deadpool performance. King was one of the vampire turned by the violent Danica Talos who has the cured and the dedicated himself to eradicating all the blockbuster, and despite his cocky attitude, he is shown to somewhat haunted by his time as a vampire. Persian Break Season 1 Episode 22 saw the gang make a run for it. Dominic Percule, Dracula Draker. Present Break, Dominic Percule and replacement Violent Drac aka Dracula in Blade Trinity. Drac is the first vampire immune to daylight and has the ability to shapeshift. Drac and the sails himself away due to an overwhelming disguise and with both the vampire and human barrier to the start of the movie and sees Blade as his only worth challenge. Porcupose, Danica Talos, and the Porcupose lost in space in the head of the powerful vampire clan and the Blade Trinity who unearthed the Drac aid in their evil scheme. She also turned Hannibal King who returned a burning hatred for her. Blade Trinity Review. Tired of their war against the half-human, half-vampire Blade vampire leader, Davis, a final solution rescued Dracula while simultaneously and framing Blade for a human massacre. As the character that the arguable reproved the comic book movie genre, Wesley Snipes J. Walker devours a good send-off with his, and that third final Blade movie, unfortunately, as with the last trilogy to invoke Trinity, is a crushing disappointment. Sadly, the blame can be laid the sequel at the feet of the David Goyer, who after writing the first who has installment pulled double duty and here and makes a right all bells of its lacking the directorial skill to the redeem his the surprisingly shoddy script, instead the overloading the action sequences with the MGA adding which hanging his actor out to dry. What Blade the hanging up his sword. Blade Trinity was meant to sever a franchise continuing introduction to Night Stalker. However, Biel was the previous little too where the Reynolds usually the rather sharp comic instincts, the boride beneath a Avenger often lies the bad they come the complete with the term below. If she the Night Stalker are not worthy, that it is up to Blade himself to redeem matter. However, try as the might, he always licks snaps is the allowed no room to shine, and ultimately notably is an face off with the Dominic Puracle. The appalling anemic Dracula ends in the simply recurring past traumas. The Blade fan previously has been extraordinary. Davis fans turn to their either like the first Blade and the Hate Part 2 or vice versa, as the least where the Blade Trinity Goyer has made a movie that everyone will agree sucks. Blade Trinity. Man, I tell you, I wish it was possible for lightning to strike 3 times in the same spot. It would be useful for many things including meteorological research and movie trilogies, but it's not the possible. Never happened, not once, only once has it had the same exact place twist, and that place was the exact spot where Blade was the standing at the time both time. What I am saying obviously is that the Blade 3, and I will not call it the Blade Trinity because what the hell kind of the name of Blade 3? is the Blade Trinity is no Blade or the Blade 2, and there are many reasons why. The most immediate thing you notice, it just does not look a good and stop. Norigotan and the Guillermo del Toro were both the careful and the artful. Blade Fire to exact and the careful composed too was so spooky, atmospheric with the shiny gold Tarnet Edge 3, directed by the guy David Gore, who had wrote and the other one but only directed the small indie drama Zigzag tries hard to imitate, and some of the both those like it has the same cinematographyist as the last one, and I mean it on the ugly movie. But you can tell you it's not quite real, not its own book, not quite capturing the previous books. I think I read this was more expensive than the other, but to me feels cheaper, almost like a really damn impressive TV version of the Blade universe, but not quite the real Blade universe. And then you notice the violence. Parker Posey is really cool as the BG vampire, as the girlfriend of the young wisecracking white dude, and was the same Blade of the FBI. Long story, but her crew are just not up to the Blade standard. It is the first and the vampire while or escorting interesting looking plus the Donald Love. The second one raised the bar, making the violence wired, scary, and the more sympathetic. Here you just a goat couple, cheese balls of them big, the wrestler guy with the beard hair, and the like. The Tyler mine is the X-Men, but not appealing. They work out of the some fancy hipster offing blood like they are the well-paid start of the some summary vampire magazine. I did not really understand what they are doing, and they are what they are. Loads of the good cats walk to them from the windows to break through. The lead villain is the Dracula, the first vampire drug up from a pyramid in the Syrian Desert. Nobody checked there before. He is a morphing monster version of the Dracula with an ancient warrior type human form. You know, some blend masculine and guy with a necklace and armor on one arm. He looks like the could be some guy from the Hercules or the Exena from the Some Angels, as actually looks a little like the Bella Lugosi, but other that it is a strikeout. Not much in the way of the Christmas or the presents. Again, seems like TV, good TV, but still TV, and we are not in the TV business here. God, this is the silver fucking screen. If you cannot take the heat, get out of the boiler room. I guess the problem is this the Blade second, you would have to throw the would have made before they made Blade second, and the surprise all over the expectation after the reasons of the Blade second is such a good damage, and the masterpiece is because it's the capture most of that was the great about the original, but put the character in the whole different situation. The first one in the running of 3 persons operation underground in a city fighting against a vampire master plane. So what do you for the second one, the transport him across the planet of Europe, and where he has to side with the team of the highly trained the vampire soldier or fight off a new more monstrous mutant type of the vampire. That's a totally different story, and it does not even take place in the human world at all. Almost every character in the movie is vampire. So shit, and where do you go from? How do you make it exciting after that? Well, Gore came up with a pretty brilliant idea, which was to skip forward 15 years to an apocalyptic future world where the vampire have won. The world is entirely run by vampire, and the Blade is the lone rebel fighting back the Omega Man of the planet of the apes on the 10 communicants will the maybe not the 10 commandants, and I have not seen that one. It is long time. The only problem is God did not use the brilliant idea that just talk about in magazines, and instead went with a less risky brilliant idea to put the Blade back in the human world and have outed in the human world. People did not know how about the vampires, so what they are the gonna think and about this Wardo is the leather jacket who carries a sword, walk around in the board day right and shooting up people, even beats, and the murders cops who has secretly worked with the vampire. Well, it runs the FBI have been the after because it felt a pretty and long-winded trolley of the non-vampire corpses. This is great, turning Blade into the outlaw, making him fight against the authorities and not just the vampire. And it is very exciting when he gets captured and interrogated and even checked by the physicians who makes the mistake of asking about the relationship with his mouth, and the whole theater went Ooh, this is great, right? A great way to spend the rises is complete different traction. He for about the 15 minutes, but then you find all the cops and the physicians and everybody has actually the familiarities and vampire bitches, and we are back to sequel one. He is just fighting vampire again. The completely new direction was a false alarm. Don't get the wrong. I appreciate the superversion, uncomfortable, realistic them in the blade picture that the authority figure are lakers of the blood suckers. I just think that after Blade second you got no choice but to try to raise the bar even higher. The Blade teams with these called the Nightstalker, which is mainly Hannibal King, the aforementioned white dude by the saved him, and the Whistler out of the wedlock daughter Abigail, who is I would say this from the remark of the Texas China as the mascot, but the fortunately that movie does not exist and will never the thought of a mention again. And that's one, but I seems to remember an earlier team of the special of vampire called the Blood Pack, who had teamed up last time, and why they are more than interesting as character and as storyline because of the tension and because they turned on him etc. And the Night Stalker as a backup and the Whistler plan, and they are convinced glad to follow their plan for spotting the vampire menace once and for all. That's great. What about the thing? What about the Blade plan? And it's Blade that executed their plan and the gigs Dracula's. But I did not help but thinks this is movie is not the giving Blade enough credit. Blade is always in top of the things. Remember when its sidekicker skewed betrayed him? It turned out it knew all along skewed was the betraying him and had a bomb implanted him. That's Blade man. We are talking about a guy who off the hand of the anybody else who has touched at Blade is the prepared. He can handle it. That's why he is just handled him. He does not name as a blind computer genius to give him a plan. Come on now, especially if you are really going to make this his last Blade movie, you can jump him like this, you the bastard. And you, what about the Westler? What about fucking Westler? I did not know about it in the red stage, but in the circles I run, the Christopherson mentor sidekick character is considered one of the pantheon, one of the great. He always grunts out of funny lines, calling Ron Parliament and Nipple head of the bustling through a wall with the two machines guns and asking catch you fuckers at the bad time. But in this one where is part in much smaller, he does not just chance he seems sick and rushes out a bunch of exposition and that they get one good line to get out. And but that's the fortunately the Hannibal King character has a lot of the funny lines to pick up the slack, but at the same time you are thinking who is scared the fucking birded muscle scared who is the overshadow the fucking whistler. That's the bad news. Here is the good news. Despite all this is still the enjoyable movie, not a benefit and the dynamic masterpiece like the other two, but an enjoyable fizzle out of the great astrologies and Lord of the Ringing and the Godfather, the Alien 3 of the series. Maybe I don't know because even when you take away all the great style, when the casting department starting fronting it, when you make the storyline a little slower, all you are doing is the flirting with the movie, but the standard there is middle of the movie looking real fucking cool. You still to Wesley Snipes and the character of the Blade, Wesley Snipes is Blade, and he has such conviction and such dedication to blood that even the whole movie around him seems little on the crappy side. He is completely unaffected. You look at him in awe, and because Wesley knows how Blade looks and talks and walks and stand and poses fight, he could walk onto the set of the some sitcom and he would still be Blade standing there. When Blade is surrounded by cops and the nose that can good away that does not see anything. His Maury Blade he holds to was the shaded as for the considering it, but then the zest and the holds that is what in a Mario pause of the surrounder. One Blade is the skeleton in the interrogation room. He still looks the imposing and does not offer much for the human questioning him and seems more occupied with the studying the room around him. figuring out what to do to bed and what to find the what they would have done because you fucking know you would have to escape. And I mean that look like the same exact blade, same the haircut, sunglass, coated armor, posture, and that the costume is a little alternate and the biggest changing in the color red. Now this coat and red on the inside, the nice touch of the figuring Dracula and wear his long sleeved red shirt under his coat. I don't know how to exactly, but somewhat the red shirt make him look like even more of a bad motherfucker. Not sure how to explain it. Somebody should look into this. So any problem? It is the movie that are not Blade fault. They are the injustice against the Blade in the clearly doing his part. David Goyer frogs for something and up in that cannot be stopped. Blade lives on. Man, I love Blade. America, I love Blade. I got a few questions though. In Blade Second, the repair were artificial created must and strain of the vampire. So why does Dracula, the original vampire, have the same kind of the mouth as the Reapers, and why is some article I read too they claim that were are carefully not make the monster and this one look like the Reaper. They are only the couple monsters and that's why and they are not very impressive, but they are most memorable feature are the splitting mouths like the Reapers. Also would not suck into the vampire, not pump I released. I blade was killing them that they are have too many good demand vulnerabilities. I mean that the really gotta work hard to kill Blade and your young companion, and all Blade has to do to cut this with the silver or exposed to sunlight. They die the instantly if they cut a human. The human still has to bleed to death. Of course, mostly empire across the world probably don't ever encounter the daywalker. If they are smart, they would not push it coming with them. Some the master plan of the vampire final solution though, so they can be left the fuck alone. And Wordsworth, where is being the driver for the Night Talker, no fucking respect. In this movie, there is a young African American gentleman who shows up out of the nowhere, pick up Blade and the kids, and you can read into the bad blood trusted him partly because he was a brother and because he is close to pump the some boards while the defying the popo and they are get in the car. Blade asks them who they are. Hannibal introduce himself and the girl, no mention of the driver at all, and the soon after he dies. Come to think, if we never get to the find and anything about any of the Blade Black friend, I always wonder what happened to that guy in the first one. And the little shop we were used to hook up and the Blade with the garlic. Blade was movie on the more powerful sedative, but I am the sure they are still friends. You are the way they gave each other a pound of the bad Blade messes that the dude and the ever now they had the hanging out with the wisecracking white kid. Anyway, the fight and the action scene and Blade second seemed like a big step from blood and the best job I had ever seen of the real super reward fighting. Remember Blade getting swung around his the head, break through a cement and the column. The action this time is not amazing, but they are a lot of fun. New stuff like car chase and welcome back Blade mobile, and I really like the scene and where Blade chases Dracula through an apartment building and the Dracula just runs through walls and jumps through the ceilings and the fucking asshole steal as some lady baby. There is also a whole of funny lines, almost of them given a Hannibal King who is sort of a Jason Lee type with the muscles and gun. I release this is guys the formula verse cracking character, but somehow how the sounds are pretty much of all them. And while being tourist to the information, he reveals that Blade is working on a new formula for the flavor crystals, a pretty good movement. You got a spectacle about some white dude masculine in the blood theory, but why he is though introduced wearing a streaker where you say hello, your name is fuck you, it is good icebreaker. One thing I have noticed about the people in the vampire slaying business, they are rescuing each other all the time. Whistler rescued Blade from the vampire laboratory in part 1. Blade saved the Whistler from a water rank in the opening of a part of the Nightstalker rescue Blade from the FBI headquarters in the part 3, and the Blade and the Abigail rescue Hannibal King from his interrogation wisecracking session in part 1. though it was just an example of the Blade tremendous rescue. He is the railroads palicate into the pole and surrounded by the enemies and the starring laughing. They are getting confused. Why is the laughing? The camera moves in the real Blade airbase with explain how the nose the Wister is about to burst with the wall and that the catch you fuck line I mentioned before, and even when he is nailed a pole he is not back into the corner. This is time it's Hannibal King that the gets to laugh of his tormentor who is the seemingly dead, and he knows the Blade and Abigail are coming to save him and the stars to brag up about it. They are used to step a little joke, but it is still did not get past the Blade aficionado the gore as the conclusion or not tipping the movie a little, but the toward the white dude, and this is a problem. Now you knows that how true this is, but many articles have the claimed and the snaps and the gore into the first fight on the set and the form on the other good travel with the biker rank in Torres. They are also claimed the tension between the Ryan Reynolds who plays the Hannibal King and the Snipes gore has been telling us sides of the month that might make a snips of all the Nightstalker that Ryan Reynolds world. This is the world probably the last Blade movie that you had just ending your Blade dies and did not decide whether or not to see, and the Snipes supposedly wrote a little new line the cinema complaining about the movie and advertising focusing on the new white kids and not such on Blade and the Ryan Reynolds